You have consciously decided you want something different. You have done the inner work, set the intention, made the decision with real clarity. And yet, the moment a genuine opportunity for financial change shows up, something in you tightens, resists, pulls back, almost against your own will. If you have felt that strange disconnect, wanting something with your mind while your body seems to be working against you, I need you to hear something that completely reshaped how I understood my own financial story. Your body does not actually know the difference between something happening to you right now and something you are simply remembering vividly enough. This is one of the most important things Dr. Joe Dispenza explains in Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and it explains so much of what gets dismissed as self-sabotage, but is actually something far more precise and far more biological than a simple lack of willpower. If an emotional experience was intense enough, and financial fear, financial shame, financial loss tend to be exactly that kind of intense, your body can continue generating the chemical and physiological signature of that experience long after the actual event is over. Not metaphorically. Literally. Your nervous system, your hormones, your physical sensations can still be responding to a financial wound from years ago, even while your conscious, thinking mind has logically moved on and even consciously decided to create something different. This means your body can, quite literally, still be living in your financial past, while your mind sits in the present trying to build a different future. And as long as that gap exists, the body will keep winning that particular tug of war, because the body's response happens faster and runs deeper than conscious thought ever can. I want to share something honest about my own history here, because I think it illustrates this with more clarity than any abstract explanation could. There was a period, years before my transition out of the financial and insurance world, where I went through a genuinely difficult financial loss. Nothing I need to detail extensively here, but it was the kind of experience that left a real mark, real fear. A felt sense, in my body, of instability and danger associated with a very specific kind of financial situation. And here is what I did not understand for a long time afterward. Even once that specific situation had resolved, even once I was years removed from it and objectively in a completely different financial position, my body kept reacting as though that wound was still actively happening. Certain financial conversations, certain numbers, certain moments that even slightly resembled the original circumstance would trigger the exact same physiological response, the same tightness, the same racing thoughts, the same urge to retreat to safety, as if no time had passed at all. My conscious mind knew, logically, that the original situation was over, but my body had never gotten that message. It was still bracing for an experience that, in physiological terms, felt as immediate and as real as it had the very first time. This is exactly what Dispenza means when he talks about living in the past biologically rather than just remembering it intellectually. The body does not file memories away neatly once we have logically processed them. If the emotional charge was strong enough, the body can continue rehearsing that exact chemical and physiological state indefinitely, essentially keeping you, on a felt level, perpetually present inside an experience that, by every objective measure, ended a long time ago. And this changes everything about how we need to think about financial healing and financial change, because if the body is still living inside an old financial wound, no amount of new strategy, new information, or even new conscious belief is going to fully resolve the pattern. You can change your thinking completely and still find your body responding to present-day opportunities as though they were the original threat from years before. By the end of this video, I am going to walk you through the specific practice I personally use to help my body finally register, on a felt level, that a particular financial past is genuinely, completely over. Not as an intellectual exercise, as an actual physiological shift. But first, I want to make sure you understand exactly how an emotional experience becomes biology in the first place, because once you see that mechanism clearly, the practice that follows is going to make so much more sense and feel so much more usable in your own life. If you have not watched the first video in this series, I would go back and start there. It lays the foundation for everything we are building on today. And if you are new here, hit subscribe and grab the free PDF on angel numbers linked in the description. So let's talk about exactly how an emotional experience stops being a memory and becomes biology. Because this is the piece that explains why old financial wounds can feel so persistently alive, no matter how much time has actually passed. Dispenza explains that when an emotional experience is intense enough, and especially when it gets repeated or reinforced over time, the brain and body essentially encode it as a survival-relevant pattern. This is not a flaw in how we are built. It is actually a very intelligent system designed to help us recognize danger quickly without having to consciously reanalyze every situation from scratch. The problem is that this same intelligent system does not distinguish well between a genuine present danger and an old pattern simply being triggered again. Here is what I mean by that practically. The first time you experienced a significant financial wound, whatever that looked like specifically in your life, your body generated a very real, very intense chemical and physiological response. Stress hormones, a racing heart, a tightening in the chest or stomach, a heightened state of alertness. All of that made complete sense in that original moment. Your body was doing exactly what it was designed to do, responding to something genuinely threatening. But here is where it becomes biology rather than simple memory. If that emotional state gets activated repeatedly enough, through recurring financial stress, through replaying the event mentally, through encountering similar circumstances again and again, the body essentially becomes efficient at producing that exact chemical state. It is no longer just responding to an external trigger. It starts to anticipate it, generating the physiological response slightly ahead of, or even in the complete absence of, any actual present-day threat. This is the difference between remembering something happened and the body still living as though it is happening. A memory, intellectually, sits in the past. A biological pattern, physiologically, exists in the present tense. Every single time it gets activated, indistinguishable, on a chemical level, from the original event itself. I want to share how this showed up specifically in my own financial life, beyond what I described in the opening. There was a particular type of financial conversation, one involving a certain kind of vulnerability, a certain kind of asking for what I was genuinely worth, that, for years, would trigger an almost identical physical reaction every single time, regardless of how much objectively safer my circumstances had become. My heart would race. My thoughts would scatter. A part of me would want to minimize the ask before I had even finished making it, just to make the physical discomfort stop. For a long time, I assumed this was simply a personality trait. I am not good at negotiating, I would tell myself. I get nervous talking about money. But what I eventually understood, through exactly the framework Dispenza describes, is that I was not nervous about the present conversation at all. My body was reproducing, with remarkable physiological accuracy, the exact chemical state associated with an old financial wound from years before, one that had absolutely nothing to do with the actual person or situation in front of me in that moment. This is precisely why this pattern is so much harder to override than people assume. You are not fighting a simple bad habit or a lack of confidence. You are working against a biological pattern that your body has, through repetition, become genuinely efficient at producing, almost like a reflex, faster and more automatic than conscious thought. And here is the piece that I think is the most important to understand before we go any further, because it explains why the past can feel so persistently present, even years after the original circumstance has resolved. The body does not require an identical situation to trigger this pattern. It only requires something close enough, a similar tone in someone's voice, a similar number, a similar feeling of vulnerability, for the entire physiological sequence to activate as though no time had passed at all. This means that countless present-day situations, completely unrelated to the original wound on the surface, can still trigger the exact same biological response, simply because they share some emotional resemblance to the original experience. And until that biological pattern itself is addressed, no amount of logical reassurance in the present moment will fully calm what the body is convinced, on a chemical level, is happening again right now. So why exactly does the past feel so persistently present even when logically we know it has ended? That is exactly where we are going next. Because understanding this mechanism clearly is what makes the practice I am going to share with you in our final section actually make sense, rather than feeling like one more technique layered on top of a pattern that has never really been addressed. So why does the past feel so persistently present, even years after the original financial wound has objectively resolved? I want to break this down clearly because once you understand this mechanism, certain reactions in your own life are going to make a completely different kind of sense. Dispenza explains that the body, once it has encoded an emotional pattern strongly enough, does not need the full original circumstance to reactivate it. It only needs a fragment, a felt sense, a tone, a number, a particular kind of vulnerability that resembles the original experience closely enough. And the moment that fragment shows up, the body responds with the entire physiological sequence instantly, as though the full original situation were happening all over again right now. This is why a present-day moment that has nothing objectively to do with an old financial wound can still trigger the exact same racing heart, the exact same tightening, the exact same urge to retreat. The body is not analyzing the actual present circumstances and concluding that danger is present. It is pattern matching against an old emotional template, and the moment enough similarity is detected, it reacts as though the past and the present have merged into a single moment. I want to share an example from a client of mine because I think it shows this mechanism from a completely different angle than what I described from my own life. He had built a genuinely successful consulting practice with consistent demand and real expertise behind his work. But every single time a client conversation involved any kind of disagreement or pushback, even mild, even completely reasonable pushback about a deliverable or a timeline, he found himself instantly flooded with an intensity of anxiety that, on the surface, seemed completely disproportionate to what was actually happening in the conversation. When we traced this back, what we found was a financial wound from much earlier in his life, involving a business partnership that had ended badly, with significant financial loss tied directly to a moment where a partner had expressed serious disagreement and dissatisfaction with his work. That original event had been genuinely significant, a real financial and emotional rupture. But the specific feeling of someone expressing dissatisfaction with his work had become so tightly encoded in his body that, years later, even a client's minor and entirely reasonable pushback was enough of a match to trigger the full original physiological response. He was not in that present moment in any actual danger. The client relationship was not at risk in any serious way, but his body did not know that. It had detected a fragment that resembled the original wound closely enough, and it responded with the same intensity as if the original financial and emotional rupture were happening all over again, right there in that conversation. This is what makes these patterns so disorienting from the inside. Logically, you can recognize that the present situation is not the same as the past one. But the body's response happens faster than that logical recognition, and it happens with a felt sense of urgency and reality that is genuinely difficult to argue with in the moment. Because physiologically, as far as your nervous system is concerned, it is not a memory. It is happening again, right now. And this is exactly why so many people can do years of conscious, intentional work on their mindset, their beliefs, their strategy, and still find themselves reacting, in specific triggering moments, in ways that feel completely disconnected from their conscious intentions. The conscious mind has moved forward. The body, still running an old biological pattern, has not received the update. So if the body is pattern matching against an old template rather than responding to the actual present moment, the real work becomes helping the body genuinely register, on a felt level, that the original circumstance is actually over, not just intellectually understood to be over, but physiologically updated. That is exactly the practice I want to walk you through in our final part of this conversation. Because this is the piece that finally allowed me to start interrupting reactions that, for years, had felt completely outside of my conscious control. Before I share the specific practice for this part of our conversation, I want to pause for a moment and say something honestly. Everything I bring to this channel is meant to share my own journey and how I genuinely changed my life. But if you do not practice what we talk about here, nothing is going to change. My intention with these videos has never been to hand you a magic pill, or to tell you this is easy, or that it happens overnight. It does not. But with consistency and daily self-awareness, you genuinely get there. You can close this video and move on to the next one, and then the next one after that. But if you never apply what you learn, all you end up with is an overload of knowledge you never actually used. And so many of us are carrying limiting beliefs that we have never truly looked at, beliefs that are quietly sabotaging this exact process we have been talking about today. I have actually been thinking about making a video specifically on limiting beliefs and just how much they block our evolution and our manifestation. If that is something you would want, let me know in the comments below. Just write limiting beliefs, and I will know to bring that conversation to you. Now, let's get into the actual practice. The way I personally began teaching my body that a particular financial past was genuinely over was not through analysis or repeated affirmation. It was through something Dispenza describes as deliberately, consciously generating a new emotional state in the body, repeatedly, until the body itself starts to update its prediction. Here is what this looked like specifically for me. Whenever I noticed the old physiological pattern rising, the racing heart, the tightening, the urge to retreat before a significant financial conversation. Instead of pushing through it or trying to think my way past it, I would pause completely. I would put my hand on my chest, take a few slow, deliberate breaths, and consciously say to my body, almost like reassuring a frightened part of myself, that was then. This is now. You are safe in this moment. This sounds simple, and in some ways it is, but the power is in the repetition and the genuine felt sense behind it. I was not just saying words. I was deliberately generating, in my actual body, the physical sensation of safety, softening my shoulders, slowing my breath, allowing my nervous system to genuinely settle rather than staying braced for an old danger that was not actually present. Over time, doing this consistently in real moments, rather than only in quiet meditation away from any actual trigger, something began to shift. The old physiological response that used to flood and completely started arriving with less intensity. And eventually, in certain situations, it stopped showing up at all, not because I had argued my body out of it intellectually, but because I had repeatedly given it a new, embodied experience to learn from instead. This is the real work of helping the body register that the past has ended. Not a single dramatic breakthrough, but a consistent, repeated practice of meeting the old physiological pattern with a deliberately generated new one, until the new pattern becomes what the body expects instead. In our final video of this series, we are going to bring everything together, the personality that creates your reality, the body that has been living in the past, and the actual quantum leap into a genuinely new financial identity. If you have not watched the first video in this series, go back and start there, because everything builds on what came before it. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this video. It truly means the world to me, and I hope this conversation brought you something real, something you can carry with you starting today. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel. We have so much more to explore together. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. You never know whose life you might change with a single video. The books that have shaped my journey and that I personally recommend are all linked in the description below. Go check them out. They are worth every page. And don't forget, there is a free PDF in the description on how to interpret angel numbers and equal hours. Grab yours. It is completely free, and it might just change the way you see the signs the universe has been sending you all along. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.